Welcome to Slackin' Off with Brady Slack.
Welcome to another episode of Slackin' Off. I'm your host, Brady Slack, and today I'm excited to slack off with Jake Steele. Jake and I met through our men's coaching group that we're a part of, and his journey, I think, is going to contrast really well with a lot of listeners that we have, people who are looking to get into the entrepreneurial space, people who are trying to become just a little bit better all the time. So without further ado, Jake, thanks for being on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Brady. Thanks for the invite. I'm super excited as well. I think this is going to be an awesome conversation, and hopefully people will be able to take a lot of value from it.
Yeah, and even if they don't, hopefully you and I can get to know each other a little bit better since we are in the same group and we can help one another. That's, again, like I said, if no one listens to the podcast, I don't care because this is the most selfish thing I do. I always get a little bit more out of it than I think people realize. So,
yeah, it's a fun sphere for sure.
Well, good. Well, let's dive into you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background. What is it that you do? And what is it that you're currently doing, or what have you done, and what are you currently doing?
Okay, for sure. So I am currently working as a software engineer. I went the very traditional route. Went to college, 4 years, computer science degree, did some internships, and then I moved down to Houston, Texas. While I was there, I lived in a 600 square foot apartment, and I started house hacking that. So I had an air mattress in my living room that I'd rented out for like $1,000 a month, and it actually paid my whole rent on my 600 square foot apartment. So then I moved back to Indiana, where I am now, and I bought a house, started house hacking that, continuing to work as a software engineer. I funneled that money into another house, and then I've kind of been exploring personal development and the routes that go along with that as I've done that. And so it's been really fun because I've been trying to build my own business, but also I've gone a more traditional route than just starting up and running. I've had my W-2 income, and then my house hacking income, and the rental property. And then I'm actually working on starting a software company with two of my buddies from college. And so it's been a really interesting journey because I've learned a lot and I've grown a lot, and I've really transformed as a person that I was, 3 or 4 years ago when all this started to today. And I've learned some lessons. Some were really easy and some were really painful. So that's a little bit about me.
Normally that's how it goes. When you were in Houston and you were in college, did you start to do this rental arbitrage, or like renting out your living room because you just kind of fell into it, or because you'd been doing some research and knew you wanted to get into this house hacking arbitrage arena?
Yeah, so for me, I never had a ton of money, and so I was like, I want to get out of college debt free. At the time, I was a big Dave Ramsey guy. I think he does a lot of good. Now I've changed some of my opinions on like debt, like for mortgages and business debt and stuff like that. But I wanted to get out of college debt free, and so the big question for me was, how do I do it? And I had some scholarships, but the very obvious answer was to become an RA, because that would pay for my housing, my food, and like really cut down on a lot of the expenses that I would have. So I actually started as an RA in college, living for free. And then I realized, living for free is great because it's one of your largest, if not your largest expense for most people. And so the next logical step for me after I got out of college was, how can I keep doing this? And so it was a very natural transition from there. And I learned a lot about the like management side of it from working as an RA, because it's really just a glorified real estate company.
Yeah. What tell me about this, Dave Ramsey. I'd love to dive into this because I think there's a stark contrast between lots of people in the finance industry, Dave Ramsey obviously being one of the biggest one. What got you into the Dave Ramsey education or mentality to begin with?
So for me, I saw my parents manage their money very poorly. I think my parents are great parents, but they very much didn't have a good grip on their financials. That it was like, hey, I want this, let's buy it. They supported me and my sister probably like in a really great way there, but probably more financially than they should have in terms of like sending us on trips and letting us do things. And so they weren't saving. And so I remember like I was probably like 12 years old. I remember being at McDonald's with my dad. I might have even been younger than that. And we had to order off the dollar menu, and I hated ordering off the dollar menu. And I was like, I hate being poor. I don't want to be poor. And we weren't poor, but we definitely weren't wealthy. And so then I remember going home and just like reading on the internet, like, how do I make money? And Dave Ramsey is one of the biggest names in the space, right? Yeah. So I read one of his programs that he put on for high schoolers, and then I read one of his books, and I was like, wow, this makes so much sense. And I actually started investing like pretty shortly after. I think it was like my 7th grade year, I started investing. I asked my grandma for stock for Christmas. So she got me some Duke Energy stock. And it was cool because that money was like, I think it was like $500. And by the time I graduated high school, it was like $1,200 or something. Yeah. And I was like, investing's awesome. And so then I really like continued to dive in. And I think the thing about Dave Ramsey that stuck out to me was the Christian side of it, yeah, and the religious side of it, because that's an important part of who I am. And I was like, oh, great. And then the more I learned about it and the more I learned about debt and how to manage it, I realized that there were some safe ways to do or to use it in a way that can, boost your financial status. So.
And what is your current view on the McDonald's dollar menu?
It is sad. So there's a lot of people out there who hate on McDonald's. I like fast food. When I grew up, I was going to all these like sporting events and stuff. And so it was really regular to eat at McDonald's or Burger King or Taco Bell. And there was a website, I don't remember what it's called, but it would give you a breakdown of calories per dollar on the McDonald's menu. And like 2 of the best items, the McChicken and the apple pie. And those have both changed drastically in the last few years. Now it's like $2 to get anything at McDonald's. And it's really sad. So, it is what it is.
I remember when we were younger and we would go to the store, and me and my brothers, we would either see a candy bar, or we'd be driving home and we'd pass a restaurant. One of us would say, hey, can I get that? Or can we eat there? My parents' response, like they wouldn't stop and just get the dollar menu. My parents' response was, oh, did you bring your money? So like from an early age, for me, it was, and mind you, I grew up very similar. My dad's a government worker. My mom's in education. So we lived okay. We weren't rich by any means. We were definitely middle class. And they helped us pay for sporting events and different activities that we wanted to go to. But I remember early on always having that question in the back of my mind, like, oh, did I bring my money? Or, oh, geez, how am I going to get money to bring my money to then go be able to get what I want? So that's an interesting, it's very similar mindset, I think, like, shoot, I don't want to order off the dollar menu anymore, or shoot, I don't have my money. What can I do to not order off the dollar menu anymore? Or what can I do to, have my own money? That's a funny contrast. So now that you have your W-2, do you feel like, and this is, I know before we started this, we were talking a little bit about our journeys, if you will, and do you feel like the security of having your W-2 has allowed you to be a little bit more risky, if you will, or not care so much about the risk while you're doing some of the house hacking or as you're starting this business?
Yeah, I think it plays a factor. I think with the house hacking, I don't think I could do it if I didn't have a W-2, because it's much harder to get approved for loans and stuff like that.
Very true.
And I could pay for my mortgage and the rental property mortgage just in my W-2 without, like, even if I wasn't making more money, because property prices where I live are very low. I think the rental property that I bought, it was a 3-bed, 1-bath, and I got it for like $70,000.
Wow.
So I have a mortgage on it, but also if I really had to, I could pay it off, right? Yeah. And so I'm carrying like what I would consider a healthy level of debt. and they're all, I think the interest rate on that's like 4.1% over 30-year fixed. So it's like $200 a month for the debt payment plus insurance or whatever. But that to me is a range where I feel like if something did happen, I could still cover it for a while and until I got back on my feet.
Now, I know you just recently got engaged. Congratulations. How does the significant other feel about the idea of starting a business or the idea of investing into real estate? Because I know it's interesting to hear how different people kind of combine that lifestyle or that desire to do some of those things. So how has that, I guess, has that conversation been brought up or have those feelings been expressed?
It's really funny that you mentioned this because literally like 2 days ago, this whiteboard was full because we have discussed finances some, but since we're getting married, we're planning for the wedding. We're not combining our accounts yet, but we're going to go ahead and start managing them together essentially. And that conversation, I don't know, man. I don't know how it was for you whenever you started having these conversations when you were getting married, but my fiance is very frugal. She like watches her money. She doesn't have any debt, and she's responsible. And I guess in my mind, I was like, oh, she's so frugal. And then when we started like planning out our wedding expenses and what we wanted to put aside for travel and for food and for other things, I realized that she is really frugal. But part of that comes from not earning a lot of money because once like my finances were up there, she was like, "Oh, we can spend money on this and this and this." And I was like, "No, that's not how it works. Like, we need to be investing and there's things that I do, and then you're doing them too, right? Like the mastermind we're in, the group we're in, it's not a cheap group, right? And so like I want to set money aside for that. I want to set money aside for I'm a big index fund guy, so for that, for real estate, and it's so funny because even today I invest so much of my income that I always feel poor. Like I'm always stressed about the budget. And my friends and she'll do the same thing. She's like, "Why are you stressed about money? You have plenty of money. You're doing fine." I'm like, "Yeah, but I dedicate because I pay myself first, right? I'm sure you do the same thing." And so I'm like, I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about all this other stuff. Like I'm like counting dimes. Like, can I afford this meal out that we're going to eat because I'm investing a lot? And that was an eye opener, just the way that she viewed money differently. Like she's getting ready to get her bonus with work. And she was like, I'm going to use it like this. And she gave me a breakdown of all of the different things she wanted to spend it on, which were all good things. It was like part of it was for the wedding, part of it was for a home renovation that we're going to do. And she was like, "What do you think?" And it crushed me to be like, you're missing the one really important part that you have to pay yourself first. And I like saw her deflate and I was like, dang it. Like, but it's just part of it, I think. I mean, how was your experience with that when you were looking at combining finances?
So our situation was a little interesting. My wife had actually just got out of a divorce, and so they didn't have any kids. They didn't have any significant assets besides maybe some money in the bank account. And my wife was working full time. She actually owned. Well, while we were dating, she was a territorial manager and trainer for a large cosmetology company, and she was doing really well. But as at the time, I was working at an accounting firm as a paid preparer while I was still in school. And so I was dealing with money all the time. I was looking at other people's finances. I was, dealing with tax returns. I was doing planning. And as we were dating, I looked at my wife and I thought, well, you could be making 1.5 to 2 times the amount of money if you did it on your own. And she didn't really think that was possible. She didn't really know how, but she finally did it. And she ended up, but when we got married, she was making over 6 figures just doing, just doing cosmetology on her own. And so it was really neat for me because I was like, sweet, I got a sugar mama. Like, I was still going to school and I was doing okay. I was making, a decent amount of income. I got done with school and I didn't have any school debt. And so when we got married, we were also lucky enough to move into my grandparents' condo that they weren't using at the time because they were living out of state. And about 8 months later, they notified us and said, "Hey, we're gonna move back to Utah." They were living in Arizona, so we're gonna be at the condo, and you can continue to use the condo. We'll be upstairs. You guys can be downstairs. And me and my wife kind of looked at each other, and we were like, I don't want to live here with them, you know. And we were in the position where we had enough money to be able to go and purchase our first house. And I think, knowing what I know now, I wish we would have done that a little bit differently. Because we got into our first house, and that's our primary residence. It doesn't have we can't rent out the basement. It doesn't have a second kitchen kind of deal. And so, knowing what I know now, I wish we would have put ourselves in the position to have bought a duplex or have bought a split level, something like that, because then we could have house hacked. However, I'm very grateful for what we did. The basement has a salon downstairs, so my wife has been able to work downstairs. But oddly enough, even though I'm in finances, this is what I do on a day-to-day basis. I help people manage their money. I give them investment advice. My wife is more anal about our money than I am. Once a month, we sit down and we go through all of our finances. We go through all of our expenses. We run our budget sheet. And even last night, this past month has been a little crazy with some travel and with some other expenses that we've had come up. And even last night, my wife, she's sitting over there stressing about this, that, or the other. And we do the same thing, Jake. And this is what I would actually recommend to a lot of people is live poor. I think the trap that a lot of people get into is they see a lot of money in their bank account, and then they know that they can go spend that money in their bank account. My wife and I do it a little bit differently because we're business owners. A lot of our expenses get put on our business credit cards. And so we have to be very careful about how much gets put on those credit cards, because if you're not careful with it, those credit card expenses can easily run up, and they can run up quick. And then when you get to the end of the month, you have this oh shit moment where I have all this money on my credit card that I can't necessarily pay off because maybe I didn't make as much as I spent. So we have to be very careful about how much money we do spend, keeping track of a budget. And my wife loves to see money in the bank account. I hate to see money in the bank account, because if I see money in the bank account, I know it's not working for me. I know it's not doing anything, and I need to get that money out of there into something that it's going to make me money in, and it's funny as well. Sorry, I'm talking so long, but my wife also loves to think like, well, we need to invest. And I have to continually talk to her about, well, like, we are investing on a day-to-day basis. And she's like, what do you mean? I don't get that. We need to buy like this stock, or we need to invest in this project. And I'm like, well, we also own 2 businesses that are worth a significant amount of money. Like, if something happened and we wanted to cash out, we would cash out for well over 7 figures, with the businesses that we own. So like, we are investing. It's just not like how your mom and dad or how my mom and dad or how any of our friends are investing. It's just a little bit different. So our conversations, I think, are a little bit different, but we manage them very similarly. All of our accounts are joint accounts. She has access to all those, besides some of the businesses that she's not a part of, right? But they all funnel down into our main business. So that's kind of how we manage finances, if you will, from a 30,000-foot view.
That's cool. Now, as you were talking about the expenses stuff, I'm curious. You have, how big is your firm? Is it like you have a bunch of employees, or is it like?
Yeah, we've got like? so it's me and my partner, and we've got I think 26, 27 employees in our accounting firm, in our tax firm.
Wow. That's crazy. Does it feel surreal to be like, because you're 27, right?
Yeah.
Is that to be 27 and have a firm of that size?
You know what? It's an interesting question, because like you, I didn't really start diving into this business growth, personal development arena, if you will, until really heavily about 4 years ago. And my wife is the individual that sometimes has to remind me to, or she'll often say, just sit down, look at where you're at, and be grateful for what you have. Because in my mind, I'm always looking for, how can we be better? How can we make more money? How can we be profitable? How can we increase our team's payroll? How can we make their lives easier, different things like that. And I'm constantly thinking of those things. And for me, I think it comes from a place of I was always involved in really competitive sports. I played soccer in some international tournaments and at a very competitive level. I played football at a very competitive level. And this for me is that fix. I'm able to get that adrenaline kind of competitive fix through business. And so um, when I sit down and when I think about what we have accomplished in the short amount of time that we've accomplished, it's a little surreal. And there are some times where I have moments. In fact, I had one of these the other day where I was actually fishing with my son, and I was like, I'm not old enough to have a 3-year-old. Like I'm not responsible enough to have a 3-year-old. And then there are some times where I'm like, I'm not young enough to have a business that's doing 7 figures, almost 8 figures. I'm not like it is a little surreal sometimes, but then I get thinking about something else that we could be doing better or something else that we need to fix. And so then it leaves me pretty quick, but I'm always looking to grow. I'm always looking to be better than I was yesterday. And so those moments come, but they come few and far between. And I guess that's kind of the blessing and the curse, if you will, that I deal with.
It's cool though, because I don't know. This is gonna sound like a backhanded compliment, but when I realized you were 27, I was like, I was surprised because it's not because you look old, but I was like, wow, he's got his own business, he's married, like he's got employees, and to me, I was like, that's like the pinnacle of what a lot of people shoot for, right? And I think it's good that you're continuing to push and grow and expand. But I think where you are now, if you look at what the like American dream is, the quintessential, house, picket fence, working hard, owning your own business, I think you've seen like accomplished that, right? And now you're continuing to level up.
Well, and like I said, I wasn't necessarily raised like this. There were certain expectations that I think the people in my sphere that helped raise me had for me, and there were expectations that I had for myself. But I think part of it too is I'll see reports, and sometimes I'll post these reports to my story about what the average net worth is for an individual that's 25 or 30 or 35 or 40, and what the average or the median income is for someone who's 25, 30, 35, 40. And I personally, this is just my personal belief, it is sometimes a little disappointing to see how low some of those numbers are. And it's nothing again, I was raised by someone who works for the government and someone who is an educator. Like they fall into those categories, right? And they have blessed my life. They are phenomenal people. But I look at some of those and I think we were put here on earth. I'm a believer in God. We were put here on earth to do great things. Shouldn't we try to do great things? And whether that is financially or spiritually or, with education, like you should do great things, and whatever that is, you should do them. And so I've got into this space where I should try and do great things. If kind of you go back to this parable that I've mentioned before on my podcast of, the talents that you learn about in the Bible, where one man was given 1 talent, one man was given 3, and one man was given 5. And the guy who had 1 hid his talent. The guy who had 3 and 5 multiplied theirs. And I think we should find whatever our talent is and continue to try and multiply that in whatever aspect that talent might be in, So I have to be careful with that because I'm the weird one. I'm the weird one who isn't satisfied with where I'm at and with what I have. It's not to say that I'm not happy and I'm not content with what I have. I could not go back to work and I would be totally fine. I could live in a small apartment with my family, or I could live in a tent and I would be fine. I would be completely happy with the status that we were at, but I'm just not content. I'm always looking to improve and be better.
Yeah.
And I think but I think that's once you're on that road, and I'd be interested to hear your side of this as far as what you've encountered in this self-development journey, if you will. But once you encounter it, you realize there's a lot more opportunity, like that you create this abundance mindset, if you will, don't you?
Yeah, it's insane. And I think a lot of people don't realize the amount of opportunity that's out there. And the mindset, it's really interesting because I'm sure, you hear about the law of attraction, and if
Yep.
you believe it comes true. And when I was learning about that at first, I thought it was a little bit out there. I was like, this is ridiculous. But the more I read about the science behind personal development and the more I talk about the science behind personal development, the more I realize it's really true. And I think
Yeah.
there's a bunch of different studies. I don't know if you're familiar with these, but I can go over them real quick for anyone that's listening. Like, there was a study that was done where they gave subjects either a hot coffee or an iced coffee. And then they came back like half an hour later and they read the script. And then they had to say whether they had to describe the character in the script. The ones given hot coffee described them as warm and caring, and the ones given cold described them as like cold and like stern. And
Mm.
it was a completely contrasting description. And the only difference was whether they were giving hot coffee
Hot
and
coffee
iced
or cold
coffee. So it was like, yeah, and it was like 80% were one, 80% were the other. And so that one small environmental change, cascades, right? Because it's setting the frame that you're going to see the next thing in. And there was a similar one. I don't know if you've heard about this one, but this one is one of my favorite ones because we talk about identity in our group all the time. And it was done among Asian American women. And so the control group was Asian American women taking a math test. Then they had a group before the test, they had them write down their identity as female at the top of the page before the math test. The other group, they had write down their identity as women. And what they saw was that or I say women, I meant Asian. What they saw was that those that identified with Asian, because there's a stereotype for Asians being good at math, scored higher than the control group. And then what they also saw that those that wrote that they were female before the test actually scored lower than the control group because stereotypically women aren't as good at math as men. And so you kind of live up to the identity and the frame that you're setting for yourself. And so when we talk about opportunity and abundance and believing that you're in the right spot, like one of my new things that I'm doing, I heard in the book the other day, was I'm always in the right spot at the right time to meet the right people to make the right deal. And then you start to see opportunities. So now when you go to the mall, because you're a CPA, you probably think, wow, someone's making $13 million a year off that garden gnome. Isn't that crazy? But when someone else goes to the mall, they think, oh, I could buy this for my kid or for my spouse or for me, because it's all about your values and where you rank wealth on your value chain. And so if you rank wealth high, you see the business when you go there. But if beauty is your ultimate value, then you see the makeup and you're like, wow, I could look so good when you view the same thing.
It's so funny because yesterday on my story, I'd posted this reel that I thought was hilarious. It's this guy and it says accountants when they go to Disneyland, and he's looking at I wonder if this inventory management must be a nightmare, or I wonder how much they're making off this food card, or I wonder how much this utility bill costs. And I was like, I do this, and I tagged my partner Mike, and he's like, I actually did this at Disney. It's just, but you're right. What identity changes or what mindset shifts did you have to make, or did you feel like you made when you started to go down this self-development route or this business mindset, if you will?
Yeah, so I think my whole journey started with, I saw a friend who was like, I don't want to say he's a piece of crap. He's a great guy. I love him. He just was doing things he shouldn't have been doing, hanging out with people he shouldn't have been hanging out with, what didn't really have his life together. And I saw him kind of start, and a year or two later, he was in shape. He was becoming a life coach. He was doing all of this stuff that was kind of propelling him forward. And I realized oh, he can do it, so I can do it too. Because there's that social proof. And then from there, there's all sorts of very standard ones. But the first one was saying, it's my fault. Wherever I am, however happy I am, however sad I am, it's my fault. And I think that was true even more so than a lot of people do, because it's really easy to say, say you don't like your job. I like my job a lot, but say you don't like your job. Um, it's easy to say, it was my boss's fault, right? But then, like when you were interviewing, did you ask questions to learn about company culture and get the chance to like figure out the kind of boss you're going to be looking for? Because at the end, like I could have asked those questions, so it's my responsibility. And so once I started going deeper and deeper and deeper into that personal responsibility, like if the relationship didn't work out, instead of saying, "Oh, the my ex was bad" or whatever, it's what red flags did I miss because I was infatuated, right? And so you can go like layers deeper. And so once I started taking responsibility, then all of a sudden the next step was, okay, if it's my responsibility, then what can I do to make a difference? And then it kind of became the strategic planning of like visualization. So I became someone who sees the future, not like a prophet, but like I can tell you what I want in different areas very clearly and very specifically.
What? So okay, so you said something, and I want to kind of talk on this for just a minute because I think this is fundamentally a big problem that I see is that a lot of people don't take responsibility for the actions and situations that they find themselves in or that they do. Um, what what brought you to the point to have the thought, it is my responsibility, it is my choice, it is my fault? What got you to that point first and foremost?
So when I was living in Texas, so I was in Louisville and I moved to Texas, and then my girlfriend broke up with me, and I was like alone down there, and I was like, I don't like it here. I'm gonna move back and be back in the Louisville area, and so I moved in with my into my grandma's spare bedroom in her house, and so like all of the things that you look at with like failure to launch, or like if you would name things that classify someone as like not successful, that was me. I was like living in my grandma's house. I was mopey. I was sad. I was playing video games like 10 or 12 or 14 hours a day. And I just got so sick of feeling like crap all the time.
Yeah.
I was just like fed up with it. I was like, if it's not my responsibility, there's nothing I can do to be happier. There's nothing I can do to change the way that I feel. But if it is my responsibility, then there is a clear path that I can take to literally completely change everything about my life, from my fulfillment to my happiness to my purpose to my wealth. Everything then I can control. And so for me, it was almost like self preservation, because I'd always been a somewhat high performer, and then I just all of a sudden wasn't. And it was just that rock bottom point.
Were you during that time when you moved back in with your like, were you blaming someone? Was there someone that you were faulting for the situation you were in?
Yeah, I was blaming everyone. I mean, like, literally everyone. It was so and so's fault for not being direct with me. It was my parents' fault for not modeling a good relationship, or for not teaching me good financial principles, or for what. And it was I was projecting like that blame on everyone but myself. And so my life got a lot better when I was like, all right, I caused it. I'm gonna deal with it, and here we are today.
I think I think it's interesting. There's this story that I read not too long ago where a teacher did he kind of did this little project, if you will, and he took balloons and had each of the kids in his class write their names on the balloon, and he had them put the balloons in the middle of this classroom. And at first, he told all the kids, go find the balloon that has your name on it. You have 3 minutes to do so. Go find the balloon that has your name on it. And only a small percentage of the children found their names with the balloon that was on it. He had everyone put the balloons back in the middle of the room, and he said, now pick up the first balloon you see and take it to that individual. You have 3 minutes to do it. And they did it in half of the allotted time. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I think it's brought up an interesting conversation point. When we are feeling down, when something is not going right, I think a lot of people, their first reaction is to blame the situation, blame another person, blame their boss, blame something that has happened, rather than taking responsibility for their own enjoyment or their own fulfillment or their own success and saying, this is my responsibility, this is my choice. I think what also happens is that a lot of times people are so busy trying to find their own happiness that they miss out on helping other people. And what I have found is when I do help other people, I am more happy myself. I find myself being more successful and putting myself in this situation where it's my responsibility for whatever that outcome might be, regardless of what is happening around me. And it's those two situations come up a lot, and I find myself, thinking, okay, what just happened? How can I take responsibility for what just happened, and how can we improve upon it? Whether that's a negative Google review or a client that just fired us or something like that, and so I think that's very important for a lot of people to understand it and to apply. I think once you apply it, like you've said, Jake, you'll find yourself in a much happier, much consistent, much better situation than where you were before. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I agree 100%. I think if you look, and it's true in your personal life, it'll be true in your business life, in your relationships, literally everything. But if you look where I was before I started taking responsibility, and now, or even not even now, let's say like the beginning of this year, let's say there's like a 3-year period. Within that 3-year period, I went from like not making very much, hating my job, living at home with my grandma, like heartbroken, to like I doubled my income. I now own multiple properties. I like my job. I'm happily engaged, and everything else is the same. I mean, I've had some internal identity shifts in the way I view myself and like my internal dialogue, but I'm still the same person. I still have the same family. I still have the same friends. Well, actually, I don't have all the same friends, but everything else is the same. The only difference is I took responsibility and committed to learning the skills and making the changes and analyzing the situations to get better. And I would say, like, you talk about like business, you can do the same thing in business. If you have, like, say you get fired from a client, like, and I'm sure you know this, but you can look at who was handling their taxes, and then it's like, were they trained effectively? If yes, were they managed effectively? Should we have hired them? Did we miss something in the interview? And so you look at all those processes, and then you improve, and then the business is better for it, right? So it's really, I would encourage everyone to try to make that shift, and it's a lot easier said than done. Like in the beginning, you have to continually remind yourself, like, I'm responsible. I can make the change. I can make it better, because it's really easy to slip back into old habits in the beginning when you're trying to get this off the ground.
What have you, I mean, obviously we're a part of the same coaching group. For those listening, that coaching group its head is Cody Jefferson. It's Roundtable, Embrace Line Roundtable. It's a fantastic group. Its focus is a lot more, we talk a lot about business, and a lot of the people in that group are doing very well in business, but it also highlights a lot about your relationship with God, your relationship with your spouse or your significant other, and your relationship with your kids, which is personally why your physical fitness, which is personally why I joined the group. I get enough of the business jargon elsewhere. What things have you done to help you continually improve yourself? It's hard to do on your own. Business is hard to do on your own. So what have you done, or what have you implemented to help you along this journey?
So for me, social proof is everything. I think it's really easy when your friends are doing things or your family are doing things that you don't want to be doing, that you don't want to be taking part of, to participate in that or listen to that, right? Like I'm sure when you were going off on your own, there might have been family members saying like, oh, what if you it's pretty risky to start your own business. Why don't you just stay working your nice, cushy cubicle job, right? And what I've seen is if I can put myself around high performers, around people that are successful, then I follow suit. And so I think it's really easy if you look at like the trajectory of my life when I was around the people in high school that played basketball and listened to rap music, I was playing basketball and I was listening to rap music. When I was in college and I was in a fraternity, people were drinking and listening to country music, so I was drinking and listening to country music. When I like got into my office job, everyone was interested in programming and like crypto, and so I got into crypto. And I realized that like I view myself as highly individual and highly stubborn, and that I will stand my own ground. But I also realize the people you surround yourself with, whether you mean to or not, will impact your beliefs, the choices that you make, the actions that you take. And so I started associating with higher caliber people and disassociating with lower caliber people. And like now, like I know that if I have a problem, the advice I'm going to get on that problem is through the lens of someone that is where I want to be versus someone that doesn't have any business giving me financial advice. Like, for example, I love my parents. My whole heart. They're awesome parents. They did an awesome job raising me. They were super present. I don't take financial advice from my parents because they're not where I want to be. It doesn't make sense. Now, in our group, like if I want to learn about finances, I could ask you or Mike or Cody or Justin or the other Justin probably, like all of the Justins, right? And I know that you guys have seen success. Maybe more than me, maybe not. It probably depends on who you ask, but I know that it's coming through a lens of someone that is where I want to go. And so I think if you shape your environment with people that are successful and that are driven and that do want to be, fit and wealthy and healthy and have good marriages, then you're more likely to do all of those things.
What are some of the really quick that reminded me of another episode? I talked to one of my good friends, Greg Reed, on another podcast episode, and one of his comments was seek counsel, not opinion. And I think that highlights really well what you just said. What are some of the contrasts between what some of those counsels or what some of those opinions are that you've seen based on the people that you try and associate yourself with versus the people that maybe you did associate yourself with?
Would you pay for the opinion? Like, would you pay for it? Like, if I wouldn't pay you to hear what you have to say, I'm not interested in hearing the advice, right? And that's just because I want counsel that's coming from a place of growth and abundance and counsel that's not selfish, right? Like if you're getting counsel from a lot of your friends or family members, they're casting the version of you that they want on you, right? So for example, if I was going to ask a friend whether I should take a job that was across the country or not, a lot of times they're going to say no because they're my friend, they like it when you're around, and they don't even realize they're doing it because it's that subconscious projection, right? So I think that's the question. Like, I now pay for advice instead of asking for free advice because the advice I get is leagues better and it all compounds.
Yeah. My wife and I have been really into watching the show Rich Life on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen it or not. It's actually pretty interesting to watch. And me and my wife have side conversations about what some of these people are doing with their money. And we were watching just barely. There's a gymnast. She was on the national or the U.S. gymnastics team or whatever. And it was kind of funny because she had made some financial decisions that she was trying to figure out if she should change or not. And she went to her mom and she had explained that her mom gives her all of this advice or whatnot. And so she asked the question was, should I sell my condo? Because she was kind of into her condo a little bit, I think over her head. And she asked her mom, should I sell my condo? And the mom says, you need to do what you feel like is best for you. And the girl gets all upset because she's like, well, you give me all advice all the time. Why can't you just tell me what to do? And I think what I've had to learn too is all of the advice comes from a place of either experience or love. And I don't think anyone in my life, when I was going to leave the accounting firm where I was working for and start my own business, I sat down and with my parents, and obviously my parents they'd owned a couple of businesses, so they had a little bit of experience. But again, kind of like you, I don't go to my parents for lots of financial advice. Um, and we were sitting down and we were talking about the pros and cons, and I remember my mom and dad just basically saying, you are going to make the decision that is best for you and your wife. You need to do what is best for you and your wife. Here's our opinion, but you've always been someone that's going to do whatever you are going to do anyways, so you're going to do whatever you're going to do. And it was a little bit refreshing to hear that, to be honest with you, because I think internally I really wanted them to tell me what to do. I wanted them to say, hey, you should or should not do this. But it was a little liberating for them to say, you're going to do what you're going to do and you're going to make the best decision for you. You need to make sure it's calculated, but you do what's best for you. And I took a deep breath and I was like, sweet, I'm gonna do it, you know. And so I think for a lot of people, this this idea of getting advice or counsel or wisdom or opinion, um, I would recommend getting a few. Get a few opinions, you know. Get a few counsels, you know. Look for people, and I think this is I was asked this on another podcast a little bit not too long ago, Jake, and the um the consensus was ask someone who's been there and done that, or ask someone who's where you're trying to get to. Because if you don't, what are you trying to get to, or what are you trying to be? And if you're able to do that, then you're going to be able to excel much quicker, much faster, at a much higher pace with much more success because you have someone who's already done it, right? Don't try and, I mean, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
And
yeah,
I think a key to that, I think a key to that I want to touch on because I think it's a good point is for you to get advice from someone who's where you want to go, you have to know what you want. And I
yeah,
think the first step to this whole personal development, business, whatever, you have to know what you want and you have to be specific about what you want. And I mean, I know you have that, right? Like you probably have a very clear vision for the next 3 or 5 years, I would guess.
it changes, but I mean, yeah, I'm fairly certain about what I want in the next 5 years. You know, what outcomes I want with my businesses, what numbers I want if I want to sell them. You know, what I'm going to. I know exactly what I would do with that money if I did sell and different things like that. But it changes sometimes. But yeah.
And that's okay. I think that's okay. I mean, we all evolve and change over time. I do have a question for you. So you said you joined Roundtable for like mostly fitness and stuff.
Yeah.
How's that going for you so far?
Good question. So to give you a little bit of background too, and maybe for for the listeners, I had been heavily involved in a few other business development groups for specific things. One for marketing, advertising, and client acquisition. I was in another one for leadership development for my business because I wanted to excel at those things and I'd spend a good amount of money doing them. And you know, for 2.5, 3 years, I'd spent a lot of time on my business. And the business was finally to a point where it was paying me what I needed to be paid, plus, right? And it's taking care of itself. I still have some operations and I still have some management and I still have a little bit of advisory that I have to do to maintain the business. But for the most part, if I were to step away, it would maintain itself, right? That being said, I had gotten to a point where I felt like my fitness was being neglected. My relationship with God had taken a back seat, and I needed to be more present with my spouse and my boys. Not that I wasn't giving them attention, not that we weren't going on vacations, but it was half-assed. They're like just very blunt. And when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, I knew I wanted to be mentored by someone who was more physically fit than me, had a potentially better relationship with God than me, was a father who understood the desire to be a good dad and to raise his children with these mindsets that we've been talking about. And when I looked at the people that I knew in my circles, and I've got some pretty neat circles, there was only one person who was excelling at all of those categories, and that was Cody. And I've talked about this with another person that he coaches and mentors and is on the board of their business. And this is the same kind of conversation we had. And so I joined Roundtable to become more spiritual, which I'm working on. I could do better at that. That's probably the biggest area that I could be better at, just to be honest with you. My fitness has been great. I had some goals for some weight gain. I'd lost some pounds just I think due to stress, and I didn't eat a lot, and I've gained some of that back. I've gained all of it back plus some. I look better than I have in the last three or 5 years, and that's just the last 3-4 months, being consistent. And I would say my relationship with my spouse and my boys is much better than it was. Tax season always kind of kicks our trash. It's really busy. There's lots that goes on. I'm always kind of high stress anyways, but I've been able to dial that back and make sure that, I leave work at work. I try and spend as much time with my boys at home. In fact, this weekend my wife is going to Arizona with some girls for a bachelorette party, and I get my boys. And one of my goals is when it's not nap time, my phone's away. I'm not working, and we're going to go on walks. We're going to go play soccer at the park. We're going to go ride the slide. We're going to play downstairs with all of his toys, and we're going to watch movies, and it's just going to be us, but I think being in Roundtable has allowed me to kind of have that mentality and understand that there's a lot more important things than a dollar in a bank account. I don't know what has been your experience. How have you seen yourself after joining Roundtable?
It's interesting because I had a, I had a little different. So I'm out of the people in there, I'm less, I'm financially successful, but I'm not as successful as a lot of guys in the group because I'm in a W-2 and most of the guys in there have their own businesses. And so for me, I was like, well, all these guys have it together in business. And I actually just been in another mastermind. It's a good mastermind, but it was solely focused on real estate. And I spent money hand over fist because it was to do with like direct mail, and it was like $1,300 a month for the mastermind, and then it was like they wanted you to spend a couple grand a month in mail and like whatever. I was spending all this money, and I was just losing money like hand over fist.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, I need to stop doing this. But Cody came in as a guest speaker in there, and I was like, you know what? I was like, maybe real estate direct to seller isn't for me. I was like, maybe I can just continue to like buy rentals, build the portfolio slowly, and go do some other kind of business because I wasn't passionate about real estate. I didn't really like it. I just wanted to be financially free, right?
Sure.
And so to me, that's been really big. And honestly, just learning from guys that have good, like healthy relationships, because that wasn't modeled super well for me over like my childhood. And so like learning how to be intentional, learning what it looks like to like plan a date night every week and like get flowers and like, surprise my fiance with a coffee. Like that's all stuff that like I just didn't see. And so the intentionality behind that and the ability to stop procrastinating because we check in every week. Did you finish your stuff? Did you not? Because I have all this stuff that like I should do, but then I end up playing video games or like playing chess or goofing off on my phone, and all of a sudden I had a week of stuff that just disappeared.
Yeah.
And so that's really I fixed that a lot. That and the diet. I had to clean up my diet a little bit because my fitness is pretty good. Like I don't look super imposing, but if you see me on my zone, I put up a lot of MEPs. So like I'm in decent shape, but I want to continue to kind of grow that as well.
Yeah. I think it kind of goes back, like our entire conversation kind of goes back to what I know has been circulating on social media a little bit. It's like, well, you can choose to be divorced or you can choose to be married. Both are hard. You can choose to be unhealthy or you can choose to be healthy. Both are hard. You can choose to, and we could go down this list of the differentiating circumstances and how each of them are hard. But what it really comes down to is it's your choice, and choose your hard. This is the hard that I have chosen. I think this is the hard that you have chosen. And we have found our rewards in what we've chosen. I think I'm like I said before, I'm perfectly content. I'm just not satisfied. There's always more to be able to do, and I think that's an overarching theme that we've kind of talked about today, and that stood out to me.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, good. Again, Jake, I thank you for being on the podcast. I appreciate it. If no one listens to this, I know I will have left with a little bit more insight and a little bit more that I know I can do, and some more coals that I can put on the fire, and some more ways that I can be better. So I do thank you. Thank you for being on the show. And again, for those that have been listening, if you've liked it, if you feel like you've gotten some value from this, please give us a comment, go to our YouTube, subscribe to our channel. Jake, thank you for being on the show. Again, I'm your host, Brady Slack, and this is another episode of Slackin' Off, where we do everything but slack off. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in to Slackin' Off with Brady Slack.